Imagine this: you're driving home late at night, exhausted after a long shift, when suddenly, flashing red and blue lights explode in your rearview mirror. You check your speed, you're not breaking any laws. But before you know it, you're being ordered out of your car, forced to drop to the freezing pavement, doing push-ups on the icy ground. Sounds like something out of a bad dream. For Rachel Carter, it was real. The night was brutally cold, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones, making every breath sharp and unforgiving. Rachel sat behind the wheel of her sleek silver Mercedes GLE, rubbing her hands together for warmth as she waited at a lonely red light. It had been another grueling day at Carter's Grill, the upscale restaurant she had built from the ground up. Managing staff, handling last-minute cancellations, making sure every guest left satisfied, it was her passion, but it drained her completely. She glanced at the dashboard. 12:42 a.m., almost home. The streets of Denver were eerily empty, the occasional set of headlights flickering in the distance. She turned up the stereo, letting the smooth, soulful voice of Erykah Badu melt into the silence. The only thing keeping her from shivering was the heated seat beneath her. Then suddenly those lights, red and blue, flashing violently behind her, her heart kicked up a beat. Instinctively, her eyes darted to the speedometer, 39 in a 40. Her stomach tightened. What the hell is going on? She wasn't swerving, no sudden stops, no reason, at least none that made sense to be pulled over. A tight knot formed in Rachel Carter's stomach. Her mind raced through every possible explanation, but none of them fit. She flicked on her signal and eased her car onto the shoulder. The patrol lights stayed locked onto her like a predator sizing up its prey. Her breath came slow and deliberate as she reached into the glove compartment, retrieving her registration and insurance. Her fingers were steady, but her pulse betrayed her thumping against her ribs, a familiar rhythm of unease. She had been here before, not often, but enough. By the time her window was rolled down, 2 officers were already approaching. The taller one reached her first, a broad, heavy-set man with a thick Midwestern accent, his name tag read, Deputy Mark Stevens. License and registration, flat, cold, no greeting. No explanation, just a demand. Rachel handed them over, her free hand staying planted on the steering wheel, visible. "Can I ask why I'm being stopped, officer?" The second cop, a woman with sharp features and blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, shifted slightly. Her eyes, cold and calculating, studied Rachel like she was already guilty of something. "Officer Jennifer Crowley," she said it like an introduction, but there was no warmth. "You were driving a little erratic back there," Crowley added, her tone measured, like she was testing the waters. "Any reason for that?" Rachel's brows pulled together. "I wasn't driving erratic. I just got off work. I was heading home." Crowley tilted her head. "Where do you work?" Rachel exhaled slowly through her nose. "I own a restaurant, Carter's Grill, downtown." That was the moment everything shifted. Stevens let out a short, dry smirk. "That right, big shot business owner?" Rachel stiffened. There was something in his voice, something mocking, something that made her stomach churn. "Then, I need you to step out of the vehicle." The bottom dropped out of her stomach. "For what?" Crowley's hand drifted toward her belt. Not on her weapon, but close enough. "Ma'am, step out of the car." Rachel swallowed, her eyes darting between the 2 officers. There was no point in arguing, no point in questioning. Slowly, she unbuckled her seatbelt, her movements deliberate, controlled. The moment she pushed the door open, the cold air hit her like a slap. It stole the breath from her lungs, made her skin prickle even beneath her coat. Stevens motioned toward the trunk. "Hands where we can see them." Rachel's hands lifted. She didn't know what was coming next, but she knew it wasn't good. She did as she was told. The quiet of the night only made everything feel louder: her breath, her heartbeat, the distant crackle of the police radio. Even the cold seemed to have a sound, whispering against her skin like an unwelcome presence. Officer Crowley moved around her car, her flashlight cutting through the darkness, sweeping over the back seat like she was expecting to find something. "You been drinking tonight?" Rachel's jaw tightened. No. Crowley tilted her head, her expression unreadable. You sure? Rachel's fists clenched at her sides. Yes. Deputy Stevens crossed his arms, his stance heavy with something Rachel didn't like. Your eyes look a little glassy. Maybe you're under something else. A lump formed in Rachel's throat. She had seen this playbook before. She knew how it went. I'm not under anything, she said, her voice measured even. Crowley stepped in closer, her boots crunching against the pavement. You know, she mused, tapping the flashlight against her palm, you're acting a little defensive. That's usually what people do when they have something to hide. Rachel exhaled slowly, forcing herself to keep her breathing steady. I don't have anything to hide. But it didn't matter. They weren't listening. They never were. The night air sliced through her coat like it wasn't even there. Every muscle in her body was screaming to move, to do something, but she knew better. Her fingers curled into her palms, her nails pressing into skin. Stay still, stay calm. Crowley studied her, as if deciding how far she could push. Then, you work in a restaurant, huh? She asked, voice casual to casual. What do you do there? Rachel's teeth clenched. I own it. Crowley's eyebrows lifted slightly, amusement flickering in her eyes. Oh, so you're the boss. A dry chuckle came from Stevens. But you don't like people telling you what to do then. Rachel didn't answer. She wasn't playing their game. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then, Crowley took another step forward. I'm going to pat you down, just a routine check. Rachel's stomach twisted. For what? I'm not carrying anything illegal. Stevens smirked, the kind of smirk that made Rachel's blood turn ice cold. She suddenly understood. This wasn't about a traffic stop. This was about power. So, you are carrying something. Rachel's head snapped up, heat rising in her chest. That's not what I said, but it didn't matter. Crowley was already on her, grabbing her wrist and twisting her roughly toward the car. Rachel clenched her teeth as cold hands roamed down her sides, over her pockets, pressing hard into the fabric of her jeans. The chill of the night was nothing compared to the burn of humiliation crawling up her spine. Cars passed by in the distance, headlights slicing through the dark. Not a single one slowed. Rachel closed her eyes and swallowed hard, forcing herself to breathe. Crowley finally stepped back. You check out. Rachel turned around slowly, wrapping her arms over her chest, trying to hold in whatever warmth she had left. Can I go now? Stevens rubbed his chin, like he was considering it. You're acting real impatient, almost disrespectful. Rachel's stomach nodded. Here it comes. Crowley let out a slow sigh, shaking her head, like a teacher disappointed in a misbehaving student. You know, I think maybe you need a lesson in compliance. Rachel's pulse slammed against her ribs. Excuse me. Stevens' grin was slow, deliberate. Drop down. Give me 20. Rachel let out a sharp, humorless laugh. What? Crowley crossed her arms. Push-ups, right now. Rachel's breath came out in disbelief. I'm not doing that. Stevens shrugged. All right. Then we can take this another route. I can say you refused a sobriety test, impound your car, maybe book you for resisting. Rachel's stomach bottomed out. She looked between them, searching, begging for even the smallest hint that this was some twisted joke. That at any moment they'd break, chuckle, tell her they were just messing around. But their faces were stone. This was real. Rachel swallowed hard, glancing around. The street was empty, no witnesses. No cameras, no help. It was just her and them. Her body burned with rage, her pride screaming for her to fight back. But what was she supposed to do? Argue? That would only escalate things. Resist? That could get her killed. She had one choice. Without a word, Rachel dropped to the frozen pavement. The second her palms hit the icy concrete, pain shot up her arms. The cold bit into her skin, seeping through her coat, her jeans, her bones. She grit her teeth and started counting. 1, 2, double quotes. Stevens let out a low whistle. Look at that. She listens. Crowley chuckled, shaking her head. Maybe she isn't as entitled as I thought. Rachel's arms trembled. her muscles screaming as the cold tore through her body like a blade. Her fingers, already stiff from the chill, ached with every push. But she refused to stop. 10, 11. She could hear them talking above her, laughing. Her blood boiled, but she bit her tongue. They wouldn't get the satisfaction of seeing her break. 15, 16. Her breath came sharp and ragged, rising in visible puffs against the freezing air. Every nerve in her body screamed, but she pushed through it. 18, 19, 20. She rose to her feet slowly, her breath heavy, her body burning. But her eyes locked onto Stephen's, hard and unflinching. "Can I go now?" Her voice was flat. Stevens tilted his head, pretending to consider it. Then, with a lazy wave of his hand, "Yeah, get out of here." Rachel turned on her heel, forcing herself not to run to her car. Every part of her wanted to bolt, to put as much distance between her and them as possible. But she wouldn't give them that satisfaction either. She got in, slammed the door shut, and locked it. Her hands trembled as they gripped the wheel, her knuckles turning white. Outside, the two officers stood there, watching, smirking. She swallowed the rage bubbling in her throat and forced herself to take one slow, steady breath. Then another, and another. She didn't look in the rearview mirror. She never wanted to see their faces again, but this wasn't over. Her whole body burned not from the cold, but from the rage, the humiliation. The powerlessness that had wrapped around her like chains on that empty street. She should have said something. She should have refused. She should have, no. She knew exactly what would have happened if she had pushed back. And it wouldn't have ended with her driving home. The soft glow of streetlights flickered across her face as she sped through the deserted streets of Denver. She wasn't even sure how she got home. One moment, she was on the pavement, pressing her frozen hands into the ice. The next, she was pulling into the driveway of her 3-bedroom home in Cherry Creek. She cut the engine and just sat there. Her chest still rose and fell too fast. Her fingers still trembled. Her knees ached from the pavement. She flexed her hands, rubbing warmth back into them, but it didn't help. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. A message from her best friend, Tasha. "Tasha, you good? Long night." Rachel stared at the screen. She could still hear their laughter, still feel the weight of their stares. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then, finally, she typed back. "Rachel, yeah, just tired." She set the phone down. And for the first time that night she let herself feel it. Rachel didn't even know how to respond. Did she say, "No, I'm not good. I just got harassed by two cops who thought humiliating me was funny"? Her throat tightened. She swallowed hard, staring out at the quiet, empty street, but her mind was still back there, on that pavement, with their laughter ringing in her ears. Then her eyes flicked to the small black camera mounted on her dashboard. The dash cam. Her pulse spiked. With stiff fingers, she reached forward and pressed the button to rewind the footage. The small screen flickered to life, illuminating the dim interior of her car. And there it was, all of it. The flashing lights, the smug faces, the moment she was shoved toward the car like a damn criminal. And the sound god, the sound. Their voices dripped with condescension, the threats, the laughter. The way they spoke to her like she was nothing. Rachel's hands curled into fists. It wasn't just her memory now. It wasn't just her word against theirs. It was real, and she had proof. For a second, she hesitated. She had been here before. Maybe not to this extreme, but she knew this game. File a complaint, get a thorough internal investigation, watch as the officers got a slap on the wrist if that. Nothing changed, nothing ever changed. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. Not this time. Rachel grabbed her phone and pulled up her contacts. She scrolled past family, past staff, past friends, until she landed on one name. Gregory Fields, her lawyer. She hit dial. She wasn't about to let this slide, and she sure as hell wasn't about to let them get away with it. The dial tone rang in her ear, her heart hammering like she had just sprinted 10 blocks. One ring. 2 rings, then a familiar voice, calm, steady. "Rachel, you all right? Gregory Fields had been her lawyer for 5 years. A sharp, no-nonsense man who didn't waste time with small talk. If she was calling him at 1:17 a.m., he knew it wasn't minor. Rachel swallowed hard. "I need you to look at something." There was a brief silence. Then, in that measured, calculating tone of his, Gregory asked, "What happened?" Rachel's eyes stayed locked on the dashcam screen, watching herself, her own body on the freezing pavement, doing push-ups like an animal under their watchful, grinning faces. Her voice was tight when she finally answered. "Cops pulled me over. No reason, made me get out, frisked me." Her jaw clenched as the video continued playing. "Then they made me do push-ups in the street." Rachel exhaled, pressing her fingers against her temple, trying to steady the whirlwind inside her head. "Then they made me do push-ups on the pavement." Silence, but this one was different, heavier. Gregory's exhale was slow, measured. She could hear him thinking, piecing things together in that meticulous way of his. "You have it on video." Rachel's grip tightened around the phone. Every second stretched unbearably long. Then finally Gregory spoke again, his tone clipped, controlled. "Send it to me. Now, don't post it. Don't say anything. Let me handle it." She didn't need to be told twice. Her hands worked fast, pulling up the footage, attaching the file, watching as it uploaded. The moment it finished, Gregory's voice came through again, sharp and unwavering. "Listen to me carefully." Rachel straightened instinctively, already knowing this was serious. "Do not delete anything. Not the original, not the backup, nothing. I'm calling in some favors first thing in the morning. We're not just going after them, Rachel. We're making sure this goes beyond a slap on the wrist." Her breath hitched. "You really think we can?" Gregory didn't hesitate. They messed with the wrong person. Rachel closed her eyes for a beat, inhaling deeply. They had no idea who they had just humiliated. She had resources. She had connections. She was on the police oversight committee for the city. That was their first mistake, and their second. Thinking she was going to stay quiet about it. But the storm was just getting started. The sun had barely risen when Rachel's phone buzzed again. She hadn't slept, not really. She had laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of that night over and over, like a twisted loop she couldn't shut off. But now it was game time. She snatched her phone off the nightstand. "Gregory," she answered immediately. "Tell me you have something." His voice was sharper than before, laced with something she hadn't heard from him in a while, satisfaction. "Oh, I have something, more than something." Rachel bolted upright. "Talk to me." She heard papers shuffling in the background. "I sent the footage to a few key people before the department could try to bury it. The mayor's office saw it, the chief saw it, and guess what?" Rachel's heart slammed against her ribs. "Both of those officers, they're done." She sucked in a sharp breath. Wait, fired already." "Not yet," Gregory said, "but the chief is scrambling. The mayor's demanding answers. This isn't something they can sweep under the rug, Rachel." She closed her eyes, exhaling slow. For the first time since last night, the weight pressing on her chest finally started to lift. This wasn't over. Not until she made damn sure they never did this to anyone else. Gregory's voice dropped, heavy with meaning. Especially not when one of their own committee members was the victim. Rachel dragged a hand down her face. It was happening. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, her feet hitting the floor as she began pacing the room. "So what now?" Gregory didn't miss a beat. "Press conference at noon. They're trying to get ahead of it, but I doubt it'll help. This is going viral, Rachel. It's bigger than just a couple of rogue cops." Her stomach twisted, not from fear, but from the weight of what this meant. She walked over to the window, pushing the curtain aside, staring out at the quiet Cherry Creek street. The world outside looked the same. But everything had changed. "Do you think they regret it?" Gregory let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Oh, they will." Rachel's phone buzzed again. Her notifications were exploding messages, missed calls, social media flooded with discussions about police abuse, racial profiling, and unchecked power. People were already talking about her case. And she hadn't even said a word yet. She clicked on one of the news alerts. Breaking: Denver Police Department under fire after dash cam video surfaces. Rachel inhaled sharply. It was real. It was happening. And by the end of the day, those officers would be jobless. But this fight wasn't just about them anymore. By noon, the press conference was everywhere. Rachel sat in her office at Carter's Grill, her laptop open, the live stream playing. On screen, Denver Police Chief Robert Langley stood at the podium, his face tight, his jaw clenched like he had just swallowed something bitter. The actions of Deputy Stevens and Officer Crowley do not reflect the values of this department. His voice was controlled, measured, a script, a damage control attempt. Then, effective immediately, both officers have been terminated from duty. Rachel leaned back in her chair, exhaled. It was done. The same two officers who had laughed at her, humiliated her, toyed with her just because they could. Now, they had been stripped of their power, but Rachel wasn't celebrating, because this wasn't just about her. It was about everybody who had been through it, and this was only the beginning. But as Rachel stared at the screen, listening to the carefully worded apology, something deep inside her twisted. This wasn't enough, because for every case like hers that got justice, how many more were there that didn't? How many people had been stopped just like she was, humiliated, abused, but had no dash cam footage, no lawyer ready to fight for them, no connections to force accountability. Her fingers tapped against the desk. This couldn't just end here. Her phone buzzed, a text from Gregory. "Gregory, we did what we set out to do, but I have a feeling you're not done yet." A slow smirk tugged at Rachel's lips. He was right. She closed her laptop and stood up, catching her reflection in the restaurant's glass windows. She wasn't just a business owner. She wasn't just a committee member. She was someone who had been silenced before. And she refused to be silenced again. This wasn't just about her. This was about making sure no one else had to go through what she did. Rachel picked up her phone and started dialing, because this was just the beginning. How many times have stories like this happened, but never made the headlines? How many people have been mistreated and had no way to fight back? This isn't just about one case. It's about the system that allows it to keep happening. If you see something, record it. If you know something, speak up. Demand accountability. Change doesn't happen by staying silent. What do you think? Should more people use their influence to fight back against abuse of power? Drop your thoughts in the comments.